Bueno, estamos aquí en una tarde en las afueras de la localidad de Charlottesville, en el estado de Virginia, en Estados Unidos, haciendo esta primera entrevista como corresponsal para nuestro querido amigo Farol Tanguero. Y hoy en particular estamos con David Chesler, que es docente de tango, además de ser un médico gerontólogo, es docente de tango desde hace algunos años en Charlottesville Tango, una pequeña comunidad a unas 3 horas al oeste de la ciudad de Washington, D.C. Vamos a hacerle a David algunas preguntas para que nos cuente cómo fue su llegada al tango y cómo fue este camino de construir una comunidad donde el tango es ajeno. So David, to begin with, I was just telling people who you are, where we are, etc. But the first question I have to ask you is, how did you get into this idea of dancing tango?
Well, my wife Betsy and I had been dancing ballroom for maybe 6 or 7 years, and then just by chance someone came to one of our ballroom dances and was dancing some Argentine tango when everybody else was doing ballroom, and I'd never seen that before, and it just struck me as something so beautiful. Mm-hmm. And it was clearly improvised. Mm-hmm. And I thought, I got to learn how to do that.
And that was the ballroom version of Argentine tango, or was it really true Argentine tango?
It's as I know now, the person was dancing sort of his own style of Argentine tango, but it was so different from the traditional American style, with the big frame and that sort of thing, and then and the more choreographed patterns. This was so different, more fluid. I just fell in love with it.
Do you think you first got attracted by the movement or by the music, or both? How was that?
I think it was at that point it was more the movement, because the music that he was dancing to was the same sort of stuff that we played in ballroom.
I see.
It was tango, but it was different than our Argentine tango.
Than what we play at milongas and what you guys play at milongas.
Right.
And so you got into this idea of studying Argentine tango in Charlottesville. How did you find there were other crazy people like you doing it?
It wasn't easy because we didn't have a tango community. My wife and I tried to learn from DVDs, which was not a good idea, but there was no teachers here. So fortunately, a couple months later, a person up in Washington, D.C., who's sort of organized the Argentine tango community in Washington, ran a series of weekend workshops for beginners. And so we did that, and then went straight to Buenos Aires.
You went straight to Buenos Aires? You jumped right in?
I did.
Oh, how was that? Tell me a little bit about that experience. What did you find when you went?
I love the city, the people. We did a lot of the tourist things. We went to EEUU but met some of the instructors, and then went off and did some privates. I remember there was so much that we didn't know. We didn't realize that it was a line of dance, that it was, we thought it was more spot, so we felt really lost. We thought we knew a little bit when we got there, and we got to EEUU, and everyone's dancing line of dance, and so that opened our eyes. But to listen to the music and to see people dance Argentine tango the way it should be danced, we fell deeper in love with it. And we continued doing a little ballroom, but more and more that fell to the side as we got deeper into.
Can you explain why tango took over the place of ballroom in your life? What's the difference between the type of dance that you do when you do ballroom dances and when you do Argentine tango? What makes it more attractive?
Well, I think for me it's the music and it's the connection. And once as I became a better dancer, so that I could begin to lead and to have a connection where I could put my interpretation of the music into a movement, and be able to do that so that my partner could follow that, that was just a marvelous event for me.
That's quite something.
And it was the fact that it was more interpretive, that it was improvisational, that I could just have this marvelous time with that. Whereas, and I liked the ballroom, I liked rhythm dances, I loved smooth waltz, but it just wasn't quite the same. Mm-hmm. And it was more patterns, and if somebody didn't know a pattern, then they really couldn't follow you very well.
Would you maybe say that it's more mechanical in ballroom, and it's a little bit more emotional in tango?
I think so. Mm-hmm. And then, as we got deeper into it, and I started to learn the music more, then it became even more enjoyable. The music is just marvelous. Mm-hmm. I'd never heard of Piazzolla before. Just in my world, that he was that this was this incredible artist that we didn't know about, and but the whole culture is just so satisfying, and especially one of the things that we found was that when we would travel and we would try to find some place for ballroom dancing so you could meet other people, very hard to find. Whereas tango,
very interesting.
You can go anywhere in the world, not
it's
just
like
the United
lodge.
States. Yeah, and you have people that you have something automatically in common with, mm-hmm. and I like that a lot. There
is some members of the family everywhere.
Absolutely.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So how did Charlottesville Tango start?
There was a couple people who had moved to town who knew a little bit of tango, and then there was a professor, a fellow from Sweden at university, who, along with a couple students, started a tango club. And then, because there was a small number of us that had any experience, we became involved with it too. And so from there it grew. We got our own studio and began having classes weekly. We began having weekly milongas, which was a lot for a community our size. And then we had people such as yourself who we were able to bring to Charlottesville so that we could get a much higher level of dance instruction. And it has just been a marvelous experience for us.
And it's been on for about, 9 years now? 10 years?
About 9 years.
On and on with no stop. Every Friday there is a milonga, or every Saturday?
It's either a Friday or Saturday, and mm-hmm. we have a practica once or twice a week, and then there's a lesson once a week.
And I understand it's a non-profit organization, right? Charlottesville Tango?
It is. Mm-hmm. It is. And
with a board and a committee, how does it work? The admins of the organization, how do you work that out?
Well, the board, anyone who's in the community is invited for meetings, but we discuss the studio itself and any special events that we have, and who we're gonna bring into our community, relationships we have with other tango communities in the nearby here in Virginia, such as in Richmond, and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. And one question that is always for us, we live in Buenos Aires, where we take it all for granted because it's there, because we have access to so much, as you saw. But the question that always rises to me is, what does it take to build a community in a place where tango music is foreign music, where this type of dance is not so well known, where there is the embrace that is not so common in the culture, and the touching and the physical part of it? What does it take to seduce people to come into a tango class and stick to it?
Well, number one is having the availability of instruction, mm-hmm. and the availability of dances at a reasonable frequency. And No, it's not for everybody because it's a complicated dance. I mean, the learning curve is pretty steep because of the lead follow. You have to learn this language. Both the follower and the leader have to learn this language so that it actually becomes fun. And so it requires a commitment. And so, typically you might have, out of 10 students, you might have 2 who are in it for the long haul. And it's always interesting to see that where they are just hooked. I mean, the music, a lot of times I think it's the music more than anything that starts it off. But, when we talk about it, what is it that attracts us to tango? It's always the music and the connection.
Always the music and the connection. Yeah. Interesting. In your case, what is your now that you know more than only Piazzolla from that first time you went to Buenos Aires, what's your favorite music if you had to choose something to dance to? Do you have any preferences?
Well, I mean, I really like DeSarli, and I think I love valse.
You like
I love that music. I love the things that you can do with valse, the turns and the syncopations. You can do that in other things too, but it really fits valse nicely. It depends. Like Di Renzo, the Piazzolla is a little bit more complicated to dance, and I like Pugliese a lot as well.
Now we know why people stay in a tango class, because of the connection, because of the music, David says. But the question now that comes to me is, why do people go to a tango class in the first place? Why do they decide to step into that place? Is it out of the need of socializing? Is it out of the need of moving? Is it because doctors prescribe it? Why do you think people see an advertisement and take the chance to go to a tango class?
I think in some of the cases, because I always ask the students why they come, and for some it's they've done other dances. A lot of them, especially the younger people, have been doing salsa, and they're a little bored with it. Or maybe they have seen other people doing tango, and like I was, and became fascinated with it because it was so different but yet so beautiful. For some people, it is they see dance as something to do that's social. There's a lot of articles about the benefits of dance from the standpoint of being social and helping people with their balance, and it gives them exercise. So we see couples come, we see people coming as individuals.
So there are many reasons why people...
A lot of different reasons.
Not which one they see. I'd like to finish asking you you've traveled around the U.S. dancing in other cities, right?
Yes.
You've danced in many different places.
Yes.
If you had to tell somebody who is going to see this interview and has never taken a tango class before, what would you tell that person? Why should they come join this lodge in the tango world? What would happen with their lives after they do it?
Well, it's very enriching. I mean, there are so few things that I look at as being physically healthy because of your active balance is so good. I'm a physician, and I work with a lot of older people, and so I see what happens when people don't keep these things up, and the problems that occur when they don't have good balance. And I've had older people come in, and as they begin to learn the dance, all that improves incredibly.
So I guess the younger the better, right?
Absolutely. And it's social. There aren't a lot of injuries.
It's a risk-free certificate to fund, maybe?
Yeah, I wouldn't, it's always not always risk-free, but most of the time. And but it's something enjoyable that you can carry through for years and years. I've when I think about our tango community, I don't know of anyone who has really gotten into tango who's ever disappeared from the community unless they've moved out of town.
Aha, very interesting. So
which is interesting. Whereas I can remember in the ballroom community, people would sort of come out, and they might show up a year or two later. I've never seen that in tango.
Ah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So everybody stays.
Everybody seems to stay.
They probably have very good teachers around.
Maybe.
So, right, I was about to forget this question. How was it that you started teaching?
Well, it started out by default. We had a couple who had been dance teachers for a long time in another city, and they came in, but then they had a family and they had little kids, and they didn't really want to teach anymore. And I was probably the most experienced person in the community, and so I was asked to carry on. And which I was initially reluctant, but I found that teaching made things a whole lot different, because I had to pay a lot more attention to details, and it made me a better dancer. And I find it fun. I do some intermediate stuff, but I really like, and I haven't tired of it yet, but I really like taking people who've never danced it before and
get them into
and get them going with it.
That's amazing. That's also very generous, because it takes a lot of patience and a lot of dedication.
Yeah, and there's a lot of disappointment because some people, they find it's not for them, or they don't have the time, but that's okay.
Last question. What's the difference between what you've seen in terms of the dance, right, and the reality of the dance floor in the milongas? What you've seen in Buenos Aires, you've been there more than once. You've been there two or three times?
Six times.
6 times, okay. What's the difference you see there with what you see in the USA, not only in Charlottesville, but in other places you've been to in the USA?
I think some of the formality of the tango culture, and
the etiquette,
the followers on one side, the leaders on another, the capsita, and I think that a lot more. Of course, the milongas are often more crowded, so the floor work in a small space is a lot more important. I think what I've seen in the States is a lot of leaders who want to try to do a lot of fancy stuff, and they don't do it well, but they kind of insist on doing it. You don't see that in Buenos Aires.
Okay. So, thank you very much for this time, and carry on building the community. It takes a lot of work, we know that, and it takes patience and dedication and devotion, so we appreciate that, from the Argentine side of the mirror. We appreciate anyone who does that for our culture around the world, so thank you for that.
Well,
thank you for the effort.
And certainly can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming and sharing your experience and your teaching.
Well, this that we're doing here is actually very important for us as well, because sometimes when we are in Buenos Aires, we don't realize how much it takes for other people around the world to build a community of tango dancers out of places where they've never heard tango music before. So that takes twice as much work as what it takes in our city, where we jump in a taxi and we're hearing Piazzolla.
Yeah,
so we really appreciate that, and we thank you for that.
Okay.
All right. In the name of the Argentine dancers, I thank you.
You're welcome.